Hello family, welcome to Stories with Storytime. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you, as you do. I was there the night she told him. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ache, like the silence is pressing down on you. A soft lamp glowed in the corner, casting long shadows on the floor. She stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand resting on the edge of the wall like she needed something to hold her up. Her other hand, trembling just slightly, lay flat against her stomach. She hadn't said the words yet, but her eyes... God, her eyes already carried the weight of 1,000 conversations. Hope. Fear. A longing to be believed, to be chosen, to be loved. Her lips parted, then closed again. You could tell she had rehearsed this moment 100 times, but now that it was here, the words felt too fragile, like they might break if she breathed too hard. He didn't look up from his phone. She took a breath that shook in her chest. "I'm pregnant," she said, and I swear the whole room seemed to hold its breath with her. He blinked, just once, slowly, then lifted his head like he hadn't heard her right. "You're what?" I'm pregnant," she repeated, softer now, like the truth would land more gently if she whispered it. He stared at her, no joy, no shock, no smile, just a long, flat silence stretching between them. And then he laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that brings warmth. It was cold, hollow, like a door slamming shut behind her. "You're not serious," he said. "This isn't happening." She took a step closer, her face starting to crack. "I didn't plan it, but it's real. I thought you should know." "You thought I should know?" His voice rose. "You think this is my problem now?" She didn't answer, but her eyes, they said everything. They begged, not for money, not even for a promise, just for a shred of decency, a flicker of care, something, anything. Instead, he stood up. Slowly, deliberately, tossed his phone onto the couch like he needed both hands free to push her out of his life. "I'm not doing this," he muttered. "I'm not ready to ruin everything for a mistake." A mistake. That word hit her harder than any slap could. You could see her flinch, not with her body, but in the way her shoulders folded inward, like she was trying to protect the child inside her from hearing it. She didn't cry. That's the thing people don't always understand. Pain doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it just sinks, slow and heavy, into the bones. He walked past her, brushing her shoulder as if she were just furniture in the way. She didn't stop him, didn't call after him. She just stood there in the dim light, her hand still on her belly. Her eyes followed the door as it closed behind him, but she didn't move. She stood still, quiet, almost hollow, but inside, something was forming. Not rage, not yet, just a sharp, slow burn of realization. He had left, and this time no one was coming to save her. The next morning came like a curtain she didn't want to pull back. The sun rose, but it didn't feel warm. It felt sharp, almost rude, slipping through the thin curtain and brushing across her skin like a reminder that the world was still turning, even if hers had stopped. She sat at the edge of the bed, if you could call it that. It was his bed, still smelled faintly of his cologne. But now the sheets were flat on one side, untouched, cold. Her phone lay in her lap, screen black. No messages, no calls, not from him, not from anyone. She had told herself she'd reach out, to his family, maybe his mother. Someone had to care. Someone had to tell him this wasn't right. That walking away from her now, like she was disposable, like the child growing inside her, meant nothing. Someone had to speak for her. She dialed anyway. Her voice shook as she introduced herself. There was a long pause on the other end. Then a slow, clipped response. "I'm sorry, but this isn't our concern." Click. Just like that. She stared at the phone, stunned. The way people dismiss you with elegance, that's the kind of hurt that stays. You expect anger, yelling. At least then it feels real. But that quiet cruelty? That's the kind that leaves no bruises on the skin, only on the soul. She reached out to a few friends after that. Old roommates, people she used to laugh with in coffee shops. No one answered. One sent a short text, "I just don't want to get involved." Another wrote, "This isn't the kind of drama I need in my life." She read those words over and over. Drama. That's what they thought this was. Not a life inside her. Not a storm she had no umbrella for. Just drama. So she stopped trying, she stopped explaining herself, stopped asking, stopped hoping someone might see the difference between weakness and being wounded. The street suddenly felt different. Not because they changed, but because she did. When she walked, she kept her head down. When she ordered coffee, her voice barely rose above a whisper. She didn't want to be noticed, not because she was hiding, but because she felt like people could see through her now. Like they could see the swollen silence inside her, the heaviness behind her ribs. She saw a mother holding her baby on the train and had to look away. Not because she didn't want it, but because she wanted it too much. That warmth, that togetherness, that sense of belonging. It felt like a language she used to speak but had forgotten. The days blurred. She ate less, slept less, smiled never. She stopped putting on makeup. Her eyes, once so alive, turned glassy, always searching the ground instead of the sky. But through it all, one thing stayed constant. Her hand, always resting on her stomach. Even when no one else stood by her, even when the world looked through her, as if she were nothing more than a mistake walking down the street. She would gently press her palm against the small life growing within. And in those moments when the world fell completely silent, she whispered inside herself, "I still have you. And you still have me." She didn't have much. A suitcase, a few shirts, a photo frame without a photo in it. But somehow, seeing her things shoved into a black trash bag made it feel worse. Cheaper. Like her whole life had been reduced to something that belonged on the curb. The landlord didn't look at her face. He didn't want to. Maybe he thought it would make him feel guilty. Maybe he just didn't care. "You haven't paid rent," he muttered, his arms folded tightly across his chest. "I gave you a grace period." She nodded slowly, not to argue, just to say, "I know." The hallway smelled like old paint and boiled noodles. Her neighbors' doors were shut. No one came out. No one wanted to be part of this scene. She bent down, picking up the worn bag. Her wrists shook from the weight, not just of what she was carrying, but of what she was leaving behind. The apartment door stood open behind her, quiet and hollow. The same room where she once laughed while cooking, once waited by the window, once whispered to the tiny life inside her, "Maybe he'll come back." He didn't. And now she was the one being pushed out. She stepped out onto the street, and the door clicked shut behind her. That sound, so simple, felt like a slap. Final. Cold. A breeze rushed by, tugging at her coat. The sky was gray, thick with the kind of clouds that couldn't decide if they wanted to rain or just hover. She looked around, unsure where to go. The city moved on, fast and loud, like it didn't even notice the girl standing on the sidewalk, holding her life in a single trembling hand. She didn't cry. She couldn't. There wasn't room for it. Not right now. But her eyes, they said everything. Not just sorrow, but shame. That deep, bitter shame that comes when the world looks at you and says, "You don't belong here anymore." She found a bench at the corner of the block, sat down slowly. The bag sagged at her feet. Her hands cupped her belly. She didn't speak, not even to herself. There was no pep talk, no sudden burst of strength, just a long, aching silence. And in that silence, something inside her whispered, not in words but in a kind of knowing, "You have no one now." But then, her fingers moved, just slightly, gently tracing the curve of her stomach, a touch so light but so full of meaning, and that's when it shifted, just a little. She wasn't truly alone. Not entirely, because inside her there was a heartbeat, small, steady, and it was still choosing to stay. The stairs groaned beneath her with every step. It was the kind of building where the walls peeled in silence, where the air smelled faintly of metal and old rice, where no one made eye contact in the hallways. 4 flights up, then a rusted iron ladder to the rooftop. She climbed it with both hands, clutching the bag, her back aching under the weight of too many days without enough food and too many nights with no place to rest. The landlady didn't say much, just pointed. The room wasn't really a room, it was a box. A cracked tile floor, one small window near the ceiling, and a door that didn't lock all the way. The ceiling sloped awkwardly, as if the building itself had forgotten how to hold her properly. Still, it was a roof over her head. She stepped inside. The air was thick, hot. It pressed against her skin like a second layer. A single mattress lay on the floor, the edges frayed, a dark stain near the corner. No sheets, no pillow. She set her bag down beside it with a soft thud and stood in the center, unmoving. The silence in that room was different than outside. It wasn't busy. It wasn't cruel. It was just hollow. A lone light bulb swung gently overhead, casting a tired yellow hue that flickered when the wind pushed through the cracks in the walls. She took off her coat, folded it carefully. That coat had become her blanket, her armor, her silence. Now, it was the only thing she had to cover herself with at night. She sat down slowly, legs trembling. The mattress gave a soft crunch beneath her. Her back leaned against the wall. She pulled her knees in, and then her arms wrapped around her belly, the way a tree wraps itself around its last green leaf before winter. Her eyes didn't cry. They just watched. The wall across from her. The tiny window. The dust that floated in and out of the fading light, like it had nowhere else to go either. She looked at that window and wondered what the world outside was doing. Were people laughing? Were they sitting at tables with warm food, with lights that didn't flicker, with hands holding theirs? And then her gaze dropped. To the floor. To her stomach. She whispered, so softly it barely touched the air, "I don't know how, but I'll make this work. I have to." There was no certainty in her voice, no big moment of power, but there was something better. A decision, quiet, trembling, real. And in that moment, surrounded by dust and cracks and everything she had lost, she did something sacred. She chose to stay alive, to stay brave, to stay soft, even when the world had gone cold. The morning air was already hot by the time she left the building. She had washed her face with cold water from the shared bathroom, patted it dry with a shirt she no longer wore. Her hair was tied back, hands a little shaky, but she stood as tall as she could in front of the mirror before she left. A plastic folder hugged close to her chest. Inside it, a resume printed at a public library and a few passport-sized photos, already slightly bent at the corners. She didn't take the bus. Couldn't afford to, so she walked. Street after street in worn shoes that had lost their shape. Her belly, now more visible beneath her loose shirt, moved slightly with each step. She kept one arm resting lightly across it, like a silent apology. "Sorry I'm making you walk so far." She reached the office building around 10 a.m. Reception was clean, cold, too cold. The kind of air that smells like expensive toner and things you can't afford to break. She waited. Other applicants were there, younger girls with pressed collars, soft perfume, and easy smiles. They didn't glance at her, but she noticed the way one of them looked at her belly, then looked away quickly, as if it embarrassed her. When her name was called, she stood fast. Too fast. The chair screeched a little and someone laughed under their breath. She ignored it. The man interviewing her didn't look cruel, just distant, detached. Like his job was to get through the stack, not listen to a story. He asked the usual questions: experience, availability, expected salary. She tried to speak clearly, respectfully. But every word she said came with a little hitch, like it was climbing uphill inside her chest. "I can work weekends, nights too. I'll do anything, sweeping, stock, front desk, whatever's needed." He nodded, but didn't smile. He glanced at her resume, then at her stomach. That's when it changed. His tone dropped. "You're expecting?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but I'm healthy and I'm ready to work. I really need this job." Another pause, a long one. He gave her a tight smile. Not warm, not mean, just final. "We appreciate your time, but we're looking for someone more flexible." More flexible. That word stayed with her as she walked out. She didn't argue, didn't cry. She just thanked him and left the way she came in, slow, quiet, her folder tucked tightly against her chest like armor that had failed. Outside, the sun had risen high, too bright. The heat pressed into her face. But still, she walked. Back to nowhere. Back to a room that wasn't a home. Back to the rooftop where no one waited. The street was crowded, but no one saw her. Just another woman walking alone with her head down, arms wrapped protectively around the one thing she hadn't lost. And even though she said nothing, I stood right there beside her. And I could hear what she didn't say. "It's okay. I didn't break this time. Maybe tomorrow someone will say yes." The park bench was old, splintered at the edges. Its paint had long since peeled, leaving behind a tired kind of gray that matched the sky. She sat on it anyway. Not because it was comfortable. It wasn't. But because her legs couldn't carry her anymore. The walk home had felt longer than usual. The folder she always held was gone now, left on the last office counter she visited. She didn't want it back. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on her lap. One of them shifted toward her belly, slowly, automatically. She rubbed the same spot she always did, small, slow circles, but even that felt heavier now. People passed by, some with strollers, others with coffee in hand, laughter in their throats. No one looked at her. She didn't blame them. To most, she was just another tired woman on a park bench. But I was sitting next to her, and I saw her eyes. They were wide open, but unfocused, like she was staring at a memory, not the path ahead. Her lips parted once, like she might say something, but no sound came out, just breath. Barely. Then came the shaking. It started in her shoulders, small and quiet. Then her chin trembled and her hand pressed harder against her mouth as if to hold something in. But it was too late. The first sob slipped through. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind that came from deep inside the chest, from somewhere raw and buried. And once it started, it didn't stop. Tears fell, not in streams, but in sharp, helpless drops. Her body folded inward, arms clutching her belly like she was trying to keep the pain from spilling out. Her knees pulled up, her face buried against them. No one noticed. No one stopped. Just wind. Leaves skipping across the concrete, a mother chasing her toddler in the distance. And her, a girl sitting alone in a public park, breaking into pieces so quietly it almost looked like she wasn't. The crying wasn't just from the rejection or the hunger or the exhaustion. It was from everything, from being unseen, from caring too much, from knowing she had no room to fall apart, and falling apart anyway. Minutes passed, maybe more. Eventually her sobs softened, her breath slowed. Her hands still held her belly, and in the quiet that followed she didn't say anything, but I could hear the thought pulsing through her chest like a heartbeat. Please. Just one person. One moment, one break, that's all I need. The park was nearly empty now. Afternoon light had begun to fade, stretching shadows across the walkway. A breeze drifted through the trees, brushing leaves against each other in a hush so soft it almost sounded like someone whispering, "Hold on." She sat still, arms wrapped around herself, the crying long since dried into silence. Her cheeks were stained, her shirt slightly damp where she had pressed her face against it. She looked small, folded, like a page left unread. And then, footsteps. Soft ones. Hesitant, slowing as they drew near. She didn't lift her head. Maybe she expected someone to pass by again, like all the others, but these steps stopped right in front of her. "Sweetheart," came a voice. Low, gentle, worn with years but warm like soup on a cold day. "Are you all right?" She looked up slowly, eyes red and glassy. An older woman stood there, maybe in her 60s. Her hands were lined, her eyes deep. She wore a faded apron over a floral dress, and her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, the kind that slips during busy workdays. She looked like someone who had seen many things, but never stopped noticing when someone needed help. The girl didn't answer, just blinked, startled, as if kindness was harder to understand than cruelty. The woman didn't push. She looked down at the belly, then back into her eyes. Her gaze softened even more. "You eaten today?" Silence. The girl shook her head. The woman nodded, like she already knew. "Come with me. I've got something warm at the shop. You can sit. No rush, no pressure." Still, the girl hesitated. Strangers hadn't been safe. Strangers had looked and judged, looked and left. But this one, she didn't look away. She didn't pretend not to see. And in that moment, that was enough. So the girl stood. Her legs were unsteady, but she rose. And for the first time in days, she didn't walk alone. The woman didn't ask questions as they walked. She didn't comment on the silence or the tears or the worn-out shoes. She just walked slowly, her steps matching the girl's as if to say, "Take your time. I'm here." They turned down a narrow alley where a small noodle shop waited. A chipped sign hung above the door, the windows fogged with warmth. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of broth and garlic. There were only 3 tables. One man slurping soup in the corner, a fan buzzing softly overhead. The woman guided her to a stool near the back, poured a cup of warm tea without saying a word. The girl wrapped her hands around it like it was something sacred. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't being looked through. She wasn't being measured or judged or turned away. She was being fed, not just with soup, but with presence, with gentleness, with the quiet dignity of being seen. And as the steam rose from the bowl placed before her, she looked at the woman and whispered, "Thank you." The woman smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. "No need, child, just eat. You're safe here." The noodle shop smelled like survival. Steam rose from big metal pots every morning before the sun finished rising. The air was thick with broth and garlic, and it clung to her clothes, her skin, her hair, as if even the scent refused to let her go. She came early, always early. The old woman never asked her to. But still, she showed up as the metal shutter rolled halfway up, rubbing her hands together to wake them. Her feet, swollen and tired, had already walked nearly an hour from the rooftop room. No money for a ride, no time to rest. Her job wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even formal. She cleaned, wiped tables with cracked plastic cloths, washed bowls until her fingers pruned, hauled garbage that made her gag some days, but she did it anyway. Sometimes she served customers when the line grew long. Quiet, polite, her voice just above a whisper. But even in this little pocket of warmth, the struggle never left. The shop was hot, small. Some customers were kind, offering a nod or a soft smile. Others ignored her completely, sliding used bowls toward her without eye contact, as if she were just another fixture. Some looked at her belly and said nothing. But the silence had weight, it always did. The back pain had gotten worse. Carrying water buckets made her lean to one side. Some nights she'd lie down on the rooftop floor and bite her lip to keep from groaning. Sleep came in broken pieces, if it came at all. Still, she never stopped. Not because she was strong, but because she didn't know what else to be. There were moments, tiny ones, where light broke through. A regular customer who handed her an orange one morning and said, "You need this more than me." A girl who left a flower on the counter with no explanation. The old woman who always made sure her bowl was filled before she left. One afternoon, after scrubbing the same table 3 times because her hands wouldn't stop shaking, she leaned against the kitchen doorway, pressing her hand to her belly. It kicked. Just a small flutter, but enough to make her eyes sting. She closed them, and for a second, just a second, she let herself feel proud. Not because she had made it, she hadn't, but because she was still here. Still trying, still standing, sore, swollen and unseen, but alive. When she opened her eyes, the old woman was watching her from behind the counter. Their eyes met. No words, just a quiet nod. And in that silence she found something precious, a small corner of the world where she didn't have to be perfect, just present. The pain started in the early hours before the sky turned blue. It wasn't sharp at first, just a low ache, like something deep inside her had begun to unravel. She sat up slowly on the thin mattress, hands pressing against her lower back. The rooftop room was quiet, except for the hum of a distant fan and the rustling of plastic bags in the corner. She waited, hoping maybe it was just another cramp, just another reminder that her body was carrying too much. But then it came again, stronger, longer. And she knew. She reached for her bag, the one she had packed weeks ago, just in case. A second-hand baby blanket, a toothbrush, a folded-up pair of socks, a small envelope with coins and bills, barely enough for the hospital's front desk. She walked down the stairs one at a time, gripping the rail with both hands. Her knees buckled slightly on the second flight. She stopped, breathed, counted, inhale, exhale, don't scream. The city was still asleep when she stepped outside. The air was heavy, street lamps buzzed, no cabs, no voices, just the sound of her own footsteps and the dull, rising thunder inside her belly. She reached the main road and waved down a motorcycle taxi. The driver barely looked at her belly, just nodded, and she climbed on, one hand on her stomach, the other holding tight as the world sped by in a blur of neon signs and concrete. At the hospital, she gave her name. Her voice cracked. She showed her ID. The nurse didn't smile, just pointed her toward a small waiting room with a plastic chair and flickering lights. She sat there, biting her lip until it bled. No one came with her, no hand to hold, no voice whispering, "You can do this." Just the pulse in her ears and the steady, crashing rhythm of a body doing what it was made to do, even if her heart wasn't ready. They finally called her name. She was alone when she pushed, alone when she screamed, alone when she whispered, "Please, please be okay." Sweat clung to her skin, her hair stuck to her face, every breath felt like it might be her last. And then, a sound. Small, sharp, alive. A cry, not hers. Hers was stuck in her throat, too swollen with disbelief. The nurse handed her a small, wrinkled body wrapped in a white cloth. The baby. Her baby. A girl. Her hands trembled as she reached out. The child was still crying, tiny gasps that filled the space like music. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead. closed her eyes, and for the first time in months she let herself cry. But not from fear, not from shame, not even from pain. This time, it was something else. Relief, love, a kind of fierce, aching wonder. She whispered it over and over as her tears fell into the folds of that soft white blanket. I've got you. I've got you now. And though the world outside didn't stop, didn't notice, didn't change, in that little hospital room, something enormous was born. Not just a child, but a mother. The hospital room was small, barely wider than the bed itself. White walls, no clock, a thin blue curtain that didn't fully close. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. Not hers. Hers was right here, curled against her chest, wrapped in the only blanket she owned. The nurse had come and gone. The papers were signed. The bill was paid, just barely, with the crumpled envelope she had kept close for months. It was gone now, all of it. But she didn't think about that. Not yet. She was too busy watching her daughter breathe. Tiny, rhythmic, fluttering breaths, so small, so real, it almost felt like a dream. The baby's fingers were impossibly delicate, like threads of silk, curling and uncurling against the side of her mother's arm. She didn't cry, not now, just slept, her head tucked into the soft place beneath her collarbone. The girl, the woman now, didn't speak. She couldn't. There were no words big enough, sacred enough to hold what she felt. She just watched, and listened, and touched the back of her daughter's hand with her fingertip, slowly, like she was afraid it might vanish if she wasn't careful. The room smelled like rubbing alcohol on warm skin. Her body still ached, her back, her legs, the weight of everything she had endured pressed into her like bricks. But beneath that pain was something she hadn't felt in so long. Stillness, not emptiness, not fear, just stillness. A moment where nothing needed to be fixed, nothing had to be done, just this. Her eyes drifted over the baby's face again. And then it happened. The tiniest smile. It came and went in less than a second. A flicker. A softness. Maybe it was just a dream twitch, something her daughter didn't even mean to do. But it lit up the girl's heart like morning sun breaking through dirty glass. She gasped softly, tears already spilling again. But this time they were quiet and full of something warmer than grief. She placed her lips against the baby's forehead, closed her eyes, held her tighter. And in that silence, she whispered what no one had ever said to her. Not when she was alone, not when she was left behind, not when she was cast out and shamed. She said it now. You are wanted. Not because she had to, but because she meant it. It started with a rash. Just a small patch on the baby's cheek. Pink. Rough. The kind of thing that might go unnoticed if you weren't watching as closely as she always did. She noticed everything. Every twitch, every cry, every shift in her daughter's breathing, because no one else was going to. Because in that rooftop room, there was no doctor, no family, no one to lean over and say she'll be fine. So she tried. She boiled water, let it cool, used clean cloth, pat it dry softly. She remembered something from the noodle shop, how the older woman rubbed a paste of herbs on her knees when they ached. It smelled sharp, earthy. She asked her about it one night after scrubbing the floor. The woman looked up from the pot, stirred once, then smiled. I'll show you, she said. It's nothing fancy, just what my mother used. The next day, they sat together before the shop opened. A plastic bowl between them, a handful of crushed leaves, a drop of oil. The old woman showed her how to grind it just right with the back of a spoon. It's all about balance, she said. Too strong and it burns. Too weak and it does nothing. That night, in the rooftop room, she dabbed the mixture gently on her daughter's cheek. The next morning, the redness had softened. By the third day, it was gone. She stared at the baby's face like it was the answer to a question she hadn't dared ask yet. Then she looked down at her hands. The fingertips stained faintly green, the smell of mint and lemongrass clinging to her skin. That was the moment. Small, quiet, but something shifted. What if this wasn't just for her? What if she could make more? There was no plan, no vision, just a thought. A tiny seed in the back of her mind, growing gently. She started collecting jars, washed out baby food containers, labeled them with tape, made tiny batches after work, stirring by candlelight when the power cut out. When her daughter slept, she mixed. At the noodle shop, she mentioned it to a customer, just in passing. My baby had a rash. I tried this. It worked. The woman asked if she could buy some. She hesitated, then nodded. That night, she sold her first jar. The money wasn't much, but it felt heavier in her hand than any coin she'd ever held. Not because of the amount, but because it came from something she made, something she knew, something she had built with her own hands in a room no one wanted to enter. And as she held her baby close that night, the city humming far below them, she didn't smile in victory. She smiled in wonder. Maybe this is the way out. She almost didn't bring it with her. The tiny jar was wrapped in brown paper, tied with a thread she pulled from her old scarf. No label, no brand, just a small hope folded into something homemade. The kind of hope you don't talk about because you're afraid it will disappear if you say it out loud. She kept it in her pocket the whole morning, fingers brushing against it every few minutes like it might melt or vanish if she let it go. The customer from the day before came in again, a young woman with soft skin and curious eyes. She ordered noodles, sat near the window, looked around as if searching for something. Then their eyes met. She didn't move at first, didn't dare believe the woman had meant it. Maybe it was politeness. Maybe she forgot. But then, a gentle wave, not rushed, not forced, just an open palm, waiting. She walked over, her heart pounding louder than her footsteps, the jar in her hand now, warm from being held too tightly. The customer smiled. "You brought it?" She nodded, silently, carefully unwrapped the jar and placed it on the edge of the table like it might break the moment if she moved too fast. The woman turned it over in her hands, opened it, smelled it. It's natural, I like that." Still, she said nothing. Her hands were clasped behind her back now, gripping each other tightly. "How much?" The question stunned her. She hadn't thought about that. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "Whatever you think it's worth." The woman raised an eyebrow, reached into her purse, pulled out a small bill and laid it gently on the table. "I think it's worth more," she said, "but this is what I've got today." She nodded, eyes burning. "Thank you." "No, thank you," the woman said. "If this helps my son's skin even a little, I'll be back for more." The jar disappeared into a canvas bag. The woman returned to her soup. She turned and walked back to the counter, slowly, holding the folded bill in her hand like it was made of glass. Back in the kitchen, the old woman looked over and gave a short, knowing smile. Said nothing, just went back to stirring the broth. But something had shifted. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was the first time someone saw value in her, in what she made, and paid for it. She looked at the money in her hand and then at her fingers, stained faintly green, still smelling of mint and oil. And in her chest, something settled. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but firmly. This is real now. The rooftop room smelled like lemongrass and lavender now. Not because she wanted it to, because it clung to everything. Her clothes, her sheets, even the soft skin of her baby's neck. The scent had soaked into the floor, into the air, into the hours between midnight and dawn when the city fell quiet and her hands kept moving. She made creams in silence, measured oils by sight, crushed herbs in a chipped bowl with the back of a spoon. The baby slept beside her in a makeshift crib made from an old drawer lined with a towel. Every so often she'd pause to check on her, fingers hovering just above her tiny chest, waiting to feel the rise and fall. That small confirmation, still here, still breathing. And then she'd go back to mixing. She used baby food jars, washed and boiled and dried under the sun. She folded labels from scrap paper, wrote her daughter's name in soft, careful script, Lena. Not as a brand, as a promise, that whatever came from her hands would carry love. Not just to soothe skin, but to remind people that softness, too, could be power. During the day, she worked at the noodle shop. During the night, she worked for herself. Some days she made 5 jars, some nights only 2, but each one mattered. She stacked them in an old fruit crate near the mattress. She stared at them sometimes before falling asleep, rows of little glass bodies, lined up like tiny soldiers guarding a fragile hope. She began offering them at the shop counter. Not loudly, not with signs, just a quiet display near the register, a small basket, a handwritten note, herbal skin balm, handmade, safe, gentle. At first, people looked and walked away. Then one picked one up, then another. Then a regular came back and said, "Hey, that cream?" It helped. She nodded shyly, the way someone does when they don't know how to take a compliment yet. The old woman behind the counter leaned in and whispered, "You might need a bigger basket." That night, under a dim bulb and over the hum of the city below, she made 10 jars. Her fingers were sore. Her back ached, but inside her, quietly, patiently, something was building. Not luck, not magic, something she had never been allowed to believe she could own. Momentum. She never meant for it to go beyond the neighborhood. The little jars sat neatly on the shop's counter. A few regulars bought them, smiled politely, sometimes returned with kind words. It worked. My baby's skin is softer. I think you've made something good. That was enough. More than enough, really. But then, the girl with the camera came. She couldn't have been more than 20. Stylish. Quick talking. Kind eyes behind big round glasses. She came in for soup one afternoon, saw the jars, picked one up and asked casually, "Did you make this?" She nodded. The girl blinked. "Like by hand? Yourself?" Again, a small nod. "Wow, that's amazing," the girl said. Then with a spark in her voice, "Do you have a page?" She hesitated. "A what?" "Social. Instagram? TikTok? Facebook?" The words sounded foreign. Big. Out of reach. She shook her head. The girl worried. "You will." She took a photo right there. The jar in her hand, the basket, the shop behind it. That night, the girl posted. She wrote, "Bought this balm at a noodle shop, made by a single mom who started from nothing. No brand, no marketing, just love and herbs. You need to try this." She tagged the location, shared her own before and after photo, and within hours, the ripple began. By morning, the shop had a line. Not for noodles, for her. People asked, "Are you Lena?" She shook her head and pointed to the baby sleeping behind the curtain. "She is." Photos were taken. Jars were sold. A woman from across the city asked for 5. Someone offered double the price. A young man helped her create a page that night, @LenaNaturals. He showed her how to upload a photo, how to add a caption, how to reply with a heart. "People want real stories," he said, "and yours, it's gold." She didn't know how to pose, but he took a photo anyway, of her holding her daughter, sunlight on their faces. The caption read, "From a rooftop room to your hands, a balm born out of love and survival. Thank you for seeing us." Within a week, orders came in faster than she could make jars. Within 2, she was buying supplies in bulk. Within 3, people started asking, "Where did you learn this?" She smiled. "On the floor of a noodle shop, at midnight, with a baby on my chest." And still, she made every jar by hand. Labeled each one with Lena's name, tied each with that same thread from her old scarf. Because this wasn't just a business. It was proof that even a girl the world once ignored could become something people searched for. The shop was louder now. People came in asking for the balm, not the broth. The old woman just smiled and waved them toward the small table near the window, where new jars now stood in neat rows, each one tied with thin twine and a label that simply read, "Lena." She could barely keep up. Every night her hands ached from mixing, pouring, sealing. The rooftop room smelled like eucalyptus and sleep deprivation, but still she kept going. Then one day, he walked in. Not young, not old, late 40s maybe, crisp shirt, polished shoes, eyes that looked like they had seen too many contracts, too many boardrooms. He didn't sit, didn't order soup. He picked up a jar, turned it slowly in his hands, then looked at her. "You made this?" She nodded, automatically now. It was the same question everyone asked. But his next words were different. "I've seen this online. It's everywhere." Her heart thudded, not with excitement, with caution. That word, everywhere, felt too big, too risky. He reached into his briefcase, laid down a card, a folder. "I run a small investment firm. We support women-led startups, especially ones that come from the ground up, like yours." She didn't move, didn't sit, didn't speak. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, not out of anger, but instinct. Because people who looked like him were the same ones who used to pass her on the street and never meet her eyes. "Not here to buy you out," he said, like he'd seen the thought in her face. "Just help you grow, if that's what you want." Still, she didn't speak. He opened the folder. Graphs, numbers, fancy words. She didn't know how to read most of them. But what stopped her, what made her knees go weak, was the small note clipped inside. "I was raised by a single mom. This matters to me." She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just breathed. Deep, slow, then looked him in the eye. "I'll need time." He nodded. "Of course." 3 days passed. She asked questions. Many. Some she didn't know how to phrase, but she asked anyway. He answered every one. Then on the 4th morning, standing in the noodle shop with her baby strapped to her chest and flower on her sleeve, she shook his hand. The deal was simple, modest, no pressure. Enough to rent a tiny workspace, enough to hire 2 part-time helpers, enough to stop using recycled jars and order new ones, real ones, for the first time. That night, as the ink dried on the paper, she sat under the rooftop sky, her daughter sleeping quietly in her lap. She looked at her palms, still stained, still cracked, but open now, not to beg, not to break, to receive. Maybe this is what rising feels like, she thought. Not loud, not sudden, but steady, like dawn. The ballroom was gilded in soft gold and pale light. Crystal chandeliers swayed slightly above polished floors. The air buzzed with polite laughter and perfume. Waiters in pressed uniforms moved through the crowd like quiet shadows. She stood near the entrance at first, watching. Her dress was simple, cream silk, tailored at the waist, sleeves soft against her skin. Her hair was tied back low, a single gold pin tucked behind her ear. No diamonds, no dramatic heels, just presence. Her name had been listed as a guest speaker. Founder of Lena Naturals, building from the ground up. She wasn't sure how she'd feel when she walked in, but it wasn't fear. Not anymore. It was something steadier. Then she saw him, across the room, black tie crooked, face thinner than she remembered, eyes darting around the crowd like he didn't quite belong anymore. A server, carrying trays. She blinked once, slowly, and he saw her. Their eyes locked, at first confusion, then disbelief, then recognition. A flush of red crawled up his neck as he stood there frozen, balancing a half-empty champagne tray in shaking hands. She didn't walk to him. She didn't need to. He came to her, slow steps, unsure, like every footfall hurt a little more than the last. He stopped a few feet away, looked down, then back up. "You look," he started, voice hoarse, unfinished. She waited. No warmth, no cruelty, just stillness. "I didn't know," he tried again, then gave up. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head slightly. Not surprised, not angry, just calm. "You left," she said. Her voice was soft, even. "I begged you to stay. You didn't even ask if I was okay." His eyes filled. Whether it was regret or shame, it didn't matter anymore. "I was scared," he said, almost in a whisper. "I was too," she replied. "The difference is, I didn't run." He swallowed hard. "I thought you'd disappear." "I did," she said quietly. "From your world, not from mine." He nodded slowly, like someone finally hearing the ending to a story they tried to forget. She stepped aside to walk past him, but paused. Just for a moment, then turned to look at him one last time. "I hope you find peace," she said, "but you won't find it in me." And with that, she walked away. Not triumphant, not dramatic, just whole. On stage, a host announced her name. Applause rose. She stepped into the light. Not to prove anything, not to reclaim the past, but to stand fully in the woman she had become. He waited outside the ballroom, in the corner, near the exit. The tray was gone now, so was the jacket. He stood with his hands in his pockets, head low, eyes fixed on the marble floor, like it might tell him what to say. She stepped out into the hallway a little after the applause died down. Her speech was done. She hadn't mentioned him, not once, not in name, not in story, but somehow it had reached him anyway. The way she spoke of nights with no heat, of rooftop dreams, of jars filled with hope. He looked up when she passed. "Wait," he said. She turned slowly. They were alone now, no lights, no cameras, just 2 people standing on opposite ends of a past neither could rewrite. "I meant to find you," he said. "I thought about it, a lot." She didn't speak. His voice cracked. "I've seen the posts, the videos, your face on the shelves at the pharmacy. I can't believe it's you." "It always was," she said softly. He swallowed, then stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. "I wasn't ready," he whispered. "Back then, I was a coward." She tilted her head. Her face unreadable, not cold, not warm, just still. "I know," she said. A pause stretched between them. Then he tried again. "I regret everything." "I'm sure you do." That stung. She saw it in his eyes, the way he blinked, quick and hard, like the words had landed sharper than he expected. But she didn't say it to wound him. She said it because it was true. He took a breath. "Can we talk sometime? Just coffee or lunch, maybe?" "No," he blinked. She looked at him fully now. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. "I don't need closure," she said. "I have a daughter. I have a business. I have peace. That's enough for me." He nodded slowly, like a man trying to accept something his heart wasn't ready to understand. Then she said one last thing, quiet but strong. "You didn't just leave me. You left her." And that broke him more than anything else could have. She turned and walked toward the elevator, her heels soft against the marble. She didn't look back. He stood there, motionless, no applause, no redemption, just the echo of footsteps and a single truth that would follow him home. The girl he once walked away from had become a woman he would never be worthy of. The studio lights were warmer than she expected, not harsh, not blinding, just enough to remind her, "You're being seen." The host smiled at her from across the sleek glass table. Polished, elegant, kind, the kind of smile that said, "We're not here to expose you, we're here to honor you." Still, her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Old habits. A makeup artist had touched up her cheeks earlier. "You have great skin," she'd said, not knowing it was because of the very balm they were about to talk about. The balm born from necessity, from hunger, from fear and love. The camera light turned red. "We're live in 3, 2. The host began. "Tonight on Voices of Change, we're joined by a woman whose story has touched millions, not just because of her success, but because of where she started. Please welcome the founder of Lena Naturals." Applause filtered in from the studio crew. Small, genuine. She smiled gently and nodded. The host leaned forward. "You've gone viral. Your products are in stores across the country. You've built something extraordinary, all while raising a daughter on your own. But tell us, how did this begin?" She paused, just for a second, not to collect words, but to breathe through what it cost to get here. Then she said softly, "It began when I was left, pregnant, alone, with nothing but a rooftop room and a child I hadn't even met yet. The room grew still. I didn't know how to build a business. I didn't even know how to take care of myself some days, but I had this one little heartbeat inside me that kept saying, 'You're not allowed to give up yet.'" The host's eyes softened. She continued, "I started mixing herbs to help with my baby's skin, not to sell, just to soothe her. But word spread. People came back. One woman said it helped her son sleep through the night." A faint smile touched her lips. "That's when I realized, maybe the things I made in the dark could help someone else find a little light." The host nodded, visibly moved. "And now here you are, featured in magazines, invited to speak at women's conferences, praised for your work. What do you say to people who see you now and think she's so lucky?" She looked directly into the camera, not with fire, but with truth. It wasn't luck. It was pain. It was choosing to keep walking when there was nowhere to walk to. It was crying quietly at bus stops. It was scrubbing tables while carrying a child. It was choosing to believe I was still worth something, even when no one else did. There was silence in the room. Not the awkward kind, the sacred kind. Then the host asked, "If your daughter were watching right now, what would you want her to know?" Her voice broke, just slightly, that she saved me, that everything we have came from the love I had for her when no one had anything left for me. She smiled again, this time fully, not because it was easy, because it was earned. The gate clicked open with a soft metallic snap. She stepped inside slowly, as if her feet still didn't quite believe the ground beneath them was hers. Gravel crunched beneath her shoes. The afternoon light spilled across the small garden path, lined with baby roses and little white pebbles her daughter had insisted on arranging just right. The house wasn't grand, it wasn't huge, but it was theirs. One story. Cream walls, big windows that let the sun in and let the breeze carry laughter back out. The curtains were linen, secondhand, but clean. The front door had a little chime that rang when it opened, and every time it did, her heart still fluttered. Inside there was space, real space, to breathe, to cook without bumping into the wall, to tuck her daughter in without having to step over stacked jars and folded blankets. The living room smelled faintly of eucalyptus and the lavender candle they lit every night. The couch was soft, not new, but soft. The cushions always slightly out of place because her daughter loved to jump on them after school, and on the wall just above the bookshelf, filled with stories they were still learning how to read, hung a photo. The two of them, barefoot in the garden, Lena holding a flower in one hand and her mother's face in the other. She passed that photo every day. That afternoon, she stood at the back window, a warm mug in her hand, watching her daughter run barefoot through the grass, arms wide, head back, squealing into the wind. She laughed, loud, free, and the sound wrapped around her mother like a blanket. She stepped outside, letting the screen door swing gently behind her. The grass was cool beneath her feet. The sun touched her face. Her daughter ran toward her, giggling, then crashed into her legs with the kind of hug only children know how to give, full, messy, and full of joy. She scooped her up, held her close, their faces pressed together, and for the first time in a long, long time, there was no tightness in her chest, no anxiety waiting around the corner, no rooftop, no rain, no hunger, just the smell of freshly cut grass, just warm hands and a happy child. Just a front door that no one could take away. She looked up at the sky, soft blue, scattered clouds, then closed her eyes and thought, this is what safety feels like. 20. Evening settled gently over the house. Golden light poured through the windows, soft and slow, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. The air was quiet, not silent, but peaceful. You could hear the low hum of the fridge, the distant sound of children playing down the street, and the rustle of leaves swaying outside the kitchen door. She sat in the living room, her legs folded beneath her, a blanket draped loosely over her shoulders. The mug in her hands had gone cold, but she held it anyway, not for warmth, but for comfort. Lena lay curled up beside her, asleep, one small arm resting on her mother's leg, her breath slow and deep. The girl who once cried in public parks, who slept on thin mattresses in rooms with broken locks, who mixed creams by candlelight, unsure if tomorrow would come. That girl still lived inside her, but she wasn't running anymore. She glanced around the room, the drawings taped to the wall, the rows of tiny glass jars drying near the sink, the quiet hum of a life she had built with her bare hands. Then she looked down at her daughter and smiled. There were no fireworks, no grand applause, just a moment, a real moment, full of softness and truth. She thought about everything that had been taken from her, and everything she had given to herself. And then, inside the quiet of her own chest, she whispered, "They thought I was finished when they left me. But I was only just beginning." And as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting their shadows long and golden across the floor, she closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to rest, fully, finally.